Bill Borton. Caregiving is becoming more and more of an issue for my fellow baby boomers. My guest this week, Tracey Lawrence, is the author of Dementia Sucks, A Caregiver's Journey, with lessons learned. Having been a caregiver for two parents who succumbed to dementia, Tracey has a unique perspective on the issues surrounding caregiving and the challenges of staying healthy and productive under extreme pressure. Tracey's commitment to raising awareness of the growing family caregiving epidemic drives her business and her professional speaking programs. Welcome to the show, Tracey.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure. So what are some of the challenges that the boomers, that the members of the sandwich generation have been facing that you've experienced?
Well, Bill, it's a lot of boomers, so-called, are taken so surprised by these situations. I know myself, when my parents got sick, I was blindsided because they weren't telling me what was going on with them. I didn't know how sick my dad was when he first, when I first understood that he was sick. And many of us are blindsided because my parents didn't have to caregive anybody. Mm-hmm. It never came up. My grandparents, when they got sick, they went into the hospital, they died. There was no lengthy increment of time when they needed help from my parents. So, and I like to talk about the myth of retirement, and I really bought into that you stop working, you start spending money like it's water. You travel, you go places, you spoil your kids and your grandkids, and then one day you just peacefully die in your sleep and the angels escort you to the pearly gates. Does that happen to anybody? But that's what I thought happened. And then, of course, my father got sick and corrected all those misperceptions. So having seen what happened with my folks, it was a great epiphany to me that most people are not equipped to deal with the caregiving tasks that are before them.
Well, there's no Caregiving 101 course that you take at your local community college.
Precisely, and although I've offered some of those classes myself, because people really need to understand there are so many moving parts, and a lot of the people in that situation, in addition to having aging living parents, also have children. And that was not the case with me, but many do. And so, they're called the sandwich generation. It's a cute little expression that kind of sums it up, but I see it more as like a pulled pork sandwich, because you're being pulled in different directions, depending on the needs of your kids and the needs of your aging parents. You're being pulled in different directions.
Well, most of us who have growing or adult children, or almost adult children, and aging parents, we've got lives, we're busy.
Absolutely.
It's not like we're sitting around with a lot of extra time, and when something starts to go wrong with mom or dad, it's like, how do we find the time and the resources?
Absolutely, and it usually starts like slow.
Yeah.
There's a gradual progression.
And mom or dad will try and hide it from the kids.
Absolutely. The last people they want to admit that they have a problem to is their children, right? They want to protect them. They don't want to be a burden, right? But it starts with like little favors, right? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? I need someone to come to the doctor with me because I don't understand what the doctor's telling me. I got this thing in the mail and I don't know what it means. Those kinds of things happened with my mom. And she was a bright lady, but she just got to a point where she couldn't comprehend what she was reading anymore, and she would feel threatened. And the dementia adds a different complexion to the problem, because a lot of times your loved one will say things to you and you're not sure how accurate a representation of the common reality that we all acknowledge is, because there are things going on in their minds that are giving them information that may not be accurate. And to try to persuade them that their what they're perceiving is not accurate is very difficult.
Correct.
Because what's going on in their minds is just as real to them as you are. So, and this is what
And they're so sure that you didn't call them yesterday.
Right.
And we didn't have that conversation.
Absolutely. It's very hard for the adult child to grasp or accept that this is happening to their parent.
Well, even if you do, what do I do about it? How do I handle this?
Right. And most people, the first thing they're going to do is try to contradict them or try to correct them. And the pro tip here is don't correct, redirect. So when you have a loved one who has dementia, rather than try and say, no, Mom, that's not a dog you're seeing over there, that's a plant, or I don't see anything, it's not there. You want to try and draw them out. You want to talk to them about what they're seeing to calm it down and to validate them. Because if you just say, you're wrong, what do you mean I'm wrong? It's right there. I mean, you can't see it. So we have to learn that what they're seeing is very real to them, and that we have to just kind of go with it. And then try to turn the conversation. You want to remind them of things that in the past would please them. Remind them of like a family story, an anecdote.
Well, because frequently they'll remember things that happened more in the past, the longer term memory.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or start like by telling them a story about something that happened with the kids, or something that funny happened to you recently, that they can kind of follow along.
Diffuses the situation, and then meanwhile it gives you time to kind of figure out how to deal with it.
Right. But the last thing you want to do is, if, like, for instance, one of your parents has died and the other parent has dementia and doesn't remember that they died, you don't want to keep reminding them that that person is dead, because they'll grieve all over again. And it's a terrible thing. And another thing people need to understand is that the emotional centers of the brain survive much longer than the other parts of the brain that deteriorate when dementia is present. So you want to nourish that emotional center, spending quality time with them, being close with them, hugging them, massaging their shoulders, things of that nature can be very powerful in helping to calm them down. And if you visit them and once you leave, they may not remember that they saw you, that you had a visit, but they'll impact the emotional connection that you had.
And on some level, they're there and they're enjoying it. My mother and father both ended their lives with dementia. My mother much sooner than my dad. And it's interesting because everybody deals with it differently. When they start to realize they're slipping and they can't hide it anymore, they could be scared, they could be angry.
Yes.
Or, I used to say my father, he's just found a happy place. He hummed and sang,
That's awesome. And there are different phases as well. Like for my mom, in the beginning, she was terrified because she knew something was going wrong, and she would lose things and she couldn't remember words that she had before. And then as her dementia progressed, she became profoundly psychotic, and she developed this developed this her own reality that was actually very entertaining. So the life that she was living in her mind was a lot more fun than the actual life that she was living at the time.
So we're going to take a break now for a word from our sponsors. We'll be back in a moment with more Live Better Longer with my guest Tracey Lawrence.
They are the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. But what does it take to strengthen our service members? What does it take to let them know that we stand behind them, wherever they are? What does it take to bridge the distance and keep them connected to family, home, and country? And what does it take to prepare them for their future? when their service to the nation is complete. What does it take to strengthen our service members so they can be the greatest force for good in the world? It takes a force. Be a force behind the forces. Share a message today.
Welcome back to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton. My guest this week is Tracey Lawrence. As a result of her experiences with caregiving with her parents and dealing with dementia, Tracey wrote a book called Dementia Sucks. And this is a caregiver's journey with lessons learned. We'll be back later in the show to talk about how you can get a copy of this book. But Kate, at this point, Tracey, what are some of the special challenges that you had to deal with that ultimately led you to write this book?
Great question. Well, you know, my mom and I had a contentious relationship, and
Before? Or?
oh yes.
Okay.
When I was a kid, you know, I could run up into my room and slam the door and blast music, and you know, and I could ignore her. But I had my mother, who was demented, living in my home with me, and that's tough because I couldn't just like run up into my bedroom and close the door because she could burn the house down. Mm-hmm. So it was an extremely challenging time, and trying to keep from letting my anger get the best of me, mm-hmm. because the person that she always was before, the person who irritated me when I was a kid, was still in there. Along with this crazy lady, mm-hmm. who was, you know, seeing all kinds of things and doing all kinds of things, and also this helpless person who was forgetting how to tie her own shoes.
And you were constantly dealing with change.
Yes.
Because who she was one minute was somebody completely different the next.
Absolutely. I went through a phase where I just, you know, I kept wondering when I wake up in the morning, like, who am I going to find here today? Mm-hmm. And while I was going through that with my mom, to kind of diffuse the emotion and the turmoil, I took to writing. And that's always been a mechanism that I've used to help myself.
So when you say writing, you talk about journaling?
Yes.
Yeah, so in other words, you're trying to figure out how to get it all out. Absolutely. So you can make sense of it. Yes. And so is that one of the ways that you found to deal with your own needs? Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a very important component of self-care, is acknowledging that you're human, mm-hmm. and that no matter what you do for this other person, you know, you still have to, life still has to go on, and you still have to take care of yourself, mm-hmm. and that's extremely important. And while when I started my journal, I was with my mom in her apartment in Florida, just the two of us, mm-hmm. and I decided to start journaling, and I determined then to also put it out as a blog, mm-hmm. because I thought if what I had been through could help other people, would have value for them, then, you know, then that was a good thing. I always try to make something good come out of something bad, mm-hmm. if I can. So the blog had some followers. I had, you know, several hundred people were following me, mm-hmm. which was nice. And I kept the blog until 2015, when my mother passed away. And then I left it. And a year later, I went back to it, and I was looking at my blog posts, and I was reading it and thinking, hey, you know what, this is pretty good. And maybe the book that I need to write is already written. Mm-hmm. And so I committed to taking those journal entries and turning them into a book. Mm-hmm. And in addition to the actual journal entries, there are lessons that I learned from my caregiving journey that I also wanted to share as lessons. Mm-hmm. There's a list of questions that you should be willing to discuss with your loved one once you actually get them to have the conversation mm-hmm. with you, which, as many of us know, is very difficult. For sure. You know, parents have a tendency to, like, hey, I don't want to talk about this, you know, who are you? Well, especially our parents were members of the greatest generation, and the things you didn't talk to your kids about were feelings mm-hmm. or money. Right, money being the really big one. Yeah. And I was so lucky because my father actually had
taken care of a lot of things before he got sick. So, and that's one of the reasons I'm able to sit here today in reasonably good health and reasonably sane, because all of, I was able to draw on the resources that my parents gave me. They gave me a wealth of tools to work with so that I was able to help both of my parents.
Now, did you have any siblings that helped out with any of this?
I have a brother.
I think you may not need to say anything more.
Yeah, but
I was very fortunate that my brother and sister and I get along, and we're all reasonably local. And so we kind of divided up the responsibilities. And I always say my brother took care of the legal and financial aspects, my sister took care of the caregivers at the facility, and I kept my brother and sister from killing each other.
You were a referee. Yeah. It's just the two of us. And when my father was sick, my brother and I worked more closely together. But when my mom got sick, my brother didn't have a really great relationship with my mom, and we were never like really close. So it was better for me to kind of handle it. Yeah. Because I knew what she wanted. I knew what she needed, and above all, she trusted me. And when someone's going through dementia, their ability to trust anyone is undermined because they can't trust their own mind. So generally, they're going to have a tough time trusting anybody.
So I know, Tracey, that some of our viewers are going to want to get in touch with you and are going to want to be able to get a hold of your book, Dementia Sucks. So what's the best way to reach you? Your contact information?
Yes. On the screen, you'll see in pink. My email is contact@traceyslawrence.com. And I have a website, traceyslawrence.com. So it's pretty easy to remember. And the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and at bookstores everywhere. It is published by Post Hill Press. So it's available. Any place that has access to the Simon & Schuster database can get the book for you if you want them to order it for you.
Wonderful, Tracey. Now, I know you're not just a writer who talks about dementia, you're also a performer and you do public speaking. What are some of the other reasons that people might want to know you?
Oh, great question. Thank you. Well, I like to talk to businesses about this hidden epidemic. What many people don't realize is that their employees, in many cases, are family caregivers, and they're not talking about it.
Correct.
And so very often a valued employee, someone who is trained and who has formerly been very reliable, all of a sudden disappears.
Or shows up late, or seems distracted.
Right, or does, there a million things can happen. And so, and most companies don't have a family caregiving policy. It's very common for companies to have a maternity leave policy or paternity leave policy, but they don't have an elder care policy. So by raising awareness in businesses about this growing epidemic, because the population is aging at an exponential rate, as we know.
And more boomers with aging parents are remaining in the workforce past normal retirement age.
Right, and very often they need care, and their millennial children are having to step up as well.
And we know millennials are really well adjusted.
Well, I think millennials get a bad rap.
I know.
Some of my favorite people are millennials. My nieces and nephews are all millennials. So, but it is a growing problem that people across the board of many demographics are being faced with this problem. So I am helping businesses to identify the problem and address it, to create a policy and resources for their employees, workshops, so that their employees can can find legal help. Working with an elder law or an estate attorney is extremely important. And talking about the different ways of being able to prepare for a time when someone might be sick, setting certain baselines, with taking parents to see neurologists, right? So that there's a baseline set for where they are right now. So as their condition deteriorates, you'll have something to look at to compare to. There are all kinds of issues that, that people are not aware of that I would love to help them to come to terms with. And I have a lot of resources, and I work with a lot of great professionals who can help in these areas.
That's really good to know, because again, this is becoming more and more of an issue as our population ages. And again, nobody takes the course because there hasn't been one.
Right.
So it's great that you've been able to take a personal situation that was very challenging for you and turn it into so many ways that you're helping people. I applaud you for that, Tracey.
Thanks so much, Bill. And it's a blessing when I can help people. I have clients I'm working with right now. I have this one poor woman, she's 73 years old. She's been caregiving her 95-year-old mom for 8 years. And her husband is 86. And he's starting to show signs of dementia. So you can only imagine how much stress that person is under. So for me to be able to help people like that, to be able to come to terms with and cope with those situations and not destroy themselves is very, very, very rewarding for me.
It's a wonderful thing. Well, Tracey, time flies when you're having fun. We're going to need to wrap. Thank you so much for being on Live Better Longer.
My pleasure.
This is Bill Borton. I'll see you again next Tuesday at 11 on RVN TV for another installment of Live Better Longer. Thank you.